On March 27th, President Trump signed the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act. This gave Americans who made $75,000 or less in a year $1,200 per person and an extra $500 per dependent. And nearly a month and a half later, the Democratic House and its Majority Leader Nancy, has proposed another stimulus bill, which is called the Health and Economic Recovery Omnibus Emergency Solutions, or HEROES Act. This will provide another round of $1,200 per person, and it will increase the dependent from $500 to $1,200. This means that a family of four that received $3,400 in the first CARES Act will now receive $4,800 in the HEROES Act. Now, here's where this gets interesting. The CARES Act passed the House of Congress with 419 yeses to 6 noes, and the Senate with a unanimous vote of 96-0, and it immediately was signed by President Trump. However, with the HEROES Act, it only passed the House with a whopping 9 votes. On top of that, the Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said that once it goes on the floor after Memorial Day, it will be dead on arrival. And even if it passed the Senate, President Trump has said that he probably won't even sign it. Which then begs the question, what is it about the HEROES Act that makes Republicans so against it? This is what we're going to be talking about. Let's get into it. What's going on, everyone, and welcome to the Money Badger channel, where I badger on about all things money. Today we're going to be talking about the HEROES Act, which is a new stimulus bill that was proposed by the Democratic Party. It's already passed the House Congress, and it's on its way to the Senate, but we're also going to be talking about why it's unlikely to pass in the Senate, and why President Trump is reluctant to sign it. On top of that, we're going to go over the details of the act and what it means to you. But before I get into all of that, guys, if you like the content I'm putting out on this channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button on the bottom right corner of this video, and by smashing the like button on this video. It's a big help to me so I can get my thoughts and expertise out to as many people as possible. So the first thing I'm going to talk about, obviously, is the more personal one, which is the stimulus checks. In the HEROES Act, any American that makes less or at $75,000 a year will receive $1,200. Now, every $100 that is above that $75,000 that you make, your check is reduced by $5, which basically means, when you do the math, that and once you hit $99,000 a year, you basically don't get anything. And then, of course, that's an individual level. If you're married, it goes to $150 because now you're just 2 people and you get $2,400 for the married couple, and then of course with that phasing out eventually. Now, the other big thing about the stimulus checks is of course the provision when it comes to dependents. Rather than $500 for dependent, you get $1,200 for your dependent, up to 3 dependents. One of the other major key things about this is that they have added in provisions that if you are a college student or if you are an adult that is listed as a dependent, you would qualify as a dependent, as opposed to the CARES Act where it was just children. Speaking of personal checks from the government, let's talk about unemployment checks. The CARES Act increased weekly unemployment checks by an extra $600 due to the coronavirus situation. And so the maximum you can get every week from unemployment was $875. That provision was going to stay there until July of 2020. The HEROES Act not only keeps that extra $600 in place for those who are under unemployment right now, but it extends it from July of this year to January of 2021. This is a huge thing for people who just got under unemployment, because if you had unemployment for 6 months, the reality is that if the CARES Act kind of kept it there, you'd only be able to get the $600 for about 2 months, and then you'd only get a maximum of $275 for the remaining of that 6-month period that you would be available for unemployment. So if the HEROES Act passes and you were a little worried that your unemployment check was going to drop from $800 to $200 or so, you can breathe a sigh of relief. If this passes, you would still be able to get that extra $600. Now, for those of you that are on the front lines during this coronavirus pandemic, first and foremost, thank you for your service. But if you were curious about hazard pay, there is a component similar to hazard pay within the HEROES Act. Basically, it's a premium pay where you will get an additional $13 an hour retroactively starting from January 27th of 2020 up until 60 days after the public health emergency ends. So basically what this means is that for every hour from January 27th until now that you have worked, you will receive an extra bump of $13 an hour in bulk, and you will receive an extra $13 an hour moving forward. So in short, this is a huge benefit for those that are on the front lines. The other big thing that a lot of people have been waiting on is, when is student loan forgiveness going to come into play? According to the HEROES Act, the United States Treasury will pay for your student loan payments from July of this year till September of 2021 at a maximum of $10,000. Basically what this means is that the United States government is going to be paying your student loan payments from July of this year to September of 2021. If you did the math on the $10,000 maximum, that basically means that if you have a monthly student loan payment of less or at $714.29, your student loan payments for that month, every month for 15 months, will be paid by the US government. So it's not necessarily a student loan forgiveness on the balance, let's say, but it's more of a adjustment to help you not have to worry about student loan payments for a period of time. Now, some of you that are watching this, I know what you're thinking. What you're thinking is, yes, I don't have to worry about making student loan payments. I would still make the payments. This is a rare opportunity to be able to drop the balance of your student loans a heck of a lot quicker over the next 15 months if this passes. What I would do is still make the payments, but just chop down at the principal a lot faster. To put this in perspective, let's say you've got $20,000 of student loan debt. At 6%, if you wanted to pay that off in 5 years, within that 15-month time frame from July until September of 2021, you would only be able to reduce your balance by a little over $4,400. If the HEROES Act passes and you still make your payments as normal, but you add it on top of the principal rather than just the payment, you would actually be cutting your student loan debt in half. So that's basically it for stimulus checks. Now let's move on to real estate, specifically renters and homeowners. If you are renting, there is now a provision within the HEROES Act that your landlord cannot evict you for up to 12 months if you do not pay rent. And on top of that, even after the 12 months, the landlord has to give you a 30-day eviction notice, which means technically it's 13 months before they foreclose or evict you. Now for homeowners, it's a little similar to the renters. If you decided to no longer make your mortgage payments, you can go into forbearance for at least 12 months. Basically what that means is that if you decide to no longer make your mortgage payment, you wouldn't have to incur any of the fees or punishment for not doing so. All of those are waived. On top of that, you can request an extra 360 days in additional forbearance for that specific provision. And the last thing is that whether you're a renter or a homeowner, if you don't make those payments, it doesn't actually affect your credit score. Historically, if you chose to not make your rental payments or mortgage payments, your credit score would then get dinged and reduced because of that. But because of the provision in the HEROES Act, that lack of payment would automatically go into like a COVID hardship, and therefore you wouldn't have to worry about your credit score getting dinged because of it. Now, whether you're renting or if you're a homeowner, the key there is that even though you have provisions to where you don't have to worry about making your rental payments or mortgage payments, the reality is that you still owe that money. So I would be careful and make sure that if you can make those payments, do so, because once everything starts blowing over, you don't want to be caught with your lender trying to get those payments back from you after everything blows over. Now, the HEROES Act have a bunch of different other components to it. Things for healthcare workers and healthcare institutions, state and local governments. There's actually a $25 billion bailout to the Postal Service to keep them running until September of 2022. And you may be thinking to yourself after hearing all of this, what's wrong with this act? Why do Republicans not want this to pass? We've already got the CARES Act, which did $2.2 trillion. What's the problem with this one? Well, first and foremost, the HEROES Act is not $2.2 trillion, it's an extra whopping $3 trillion, which of course will increase the national debt. Now, I could dive into the economic arguments of why the national debt is actually technically an irrelevant number, but that's a totally other video for another time. But in all seriousness, when you think about the HEROES Act and you think about student loan forgiveness, increasing wages for frontline workers, and another stimulus check, the big concern for Republicans is this really a means to help the American people, or is it a means to push the Democratic narrative? The Republicans believe that the Democrats believe that through the HEROES Act, they can not so much help the American people, but push certain ideology for big government. They think that the Democrats want the American people to get used to the fact that they keep getting stimulus checks, and they just want to keep going with that. And speaking of Democratic initiatives, one of the biggest deal breakers in the HEROES Act is that it does not provide HIDE provisions and HIDE protections within certain key areas of the act. For those of you that don't know, the Hyde Amendment that was passed back in 1976 basically bars the federal government from using federal funds to fund elective abortions. So a big concern with the Republican Party is that without the provisions, these Hyde provisions and protections within the HEROES Act, the Democratic Party can use some of this funding in order to fund Planned Parenthood and other abortion clinics. So it's a bit of a dilemma when it comes to people who are pro-life, because there are people who are pro-life that are hurting that would like to get another stimulus check, but do you really want to potentially fund Planned Parenthood in the process? The lack of Hyde protections within the act is obviously one of the biggest components of why it's a deal breaker between Republicans and Democrats, and depending on how you feel about it, I'd love to know your comments down below. So guys, in short, that is the broad strokes of the HEROES Act and why there's so much tension in DC about this particular act. While there's a lot of good stuff within it, there is obviously some things in there that a lot of people don't necessarily like. And at the end of the day, we'll just have to wait and see on whether or not it ends up getting moved or modified somewhere within the Senate, and then we'll have to start this whole process again. But again, it's another stimulus bill, and we'll see where it goes. And lastly, guys, I would love to know how you're feeling about this. You know, do you want the stimulus bill? Do you not want the stimulus bill? Leave some of that stuff in the comments down below. And as always, guys, if you like the content and information I'm putting out on this channel, be sure to subscribe and smash the like button for the algorithm. Badger out.